You ready?
I don't know if she's
I'm fixing to whack this.
hang on to everything. Should we go grab her?
What's her name? I'll get her.
I don't know if she's coming back or.
Okay, you know. She's on the phone.
I guess we'll interrupt.
All right, we're going to go. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the St. Tammany Parish Board of Adjustment meeting for the month of February, February 7th at 2 p.m. We're good to go. I call the meeting to order. How about a roll call, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Ballantyne from Mandeville.
Here.
Mrs. Christy Thomas from Mandeville.
Here.
Mr. Daly from Covington.
Here.
Mr. Blosh from Mandeville.
Here.
Mr. Spees from Lacombe.
Here.
Mr. Swindell from Covington. And Mr. Sanders from Slidell.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Everybody, please turn off any and all electronic devices. Turn your phone off. I did mine because I'm usually the one that fails to do it. Any appeals to the decision of this board should be directed to the 22nd Judicial Court. Speaker cards are available over on this desk if you would like to speak, but I will be sure to recognize everybody and conduct that so everybody's got a chance to talk. The public speaking, there are 10 minutes allowed for somebody to present the case. 10 minutes are allowed for people to object to it. And then after that, each side would have 5 minutes to in rebuttal. And that's the extent of the public speaking. It will be recorded right there above me. And after your case has been reviewed, we would ask that you please quietly leave the room here and let us get on with the next cases and move everything along quickly. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the January 3rd minutes. Anybody like to comment on that, or I'll entertain a motion?
Chairman, I move we accept minutes as submitted.
I got a motion from Mr. Blosh to approve the minutes as written. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Got a second from Mr. Daly. Got any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote with your screen. Okay.
Motion carries.
Motion carried. All right, moving right along, the first case for this afternoon is BOA case 2022-3095. There's a request by an applicant in an NC4 neighborhood commercial district to reduce the required setbacks for an existing cellular tower to 40.43 feet and to 74.77 feet on the south side, and 50.47 feet on the west side, and to 15 feet on the east side. Property is located at 23305 Louisiana Highway 1088 in Mandeville, Louisiana. The applicant is Moore 59 LLC, Paul Damian Rees, represented by Mr. Paul Marone. Mr. Marone, would you like to come forward and state your name and staff comments, please?
This case has been postponed a few times in front of you, and the representative submitted a revised subdivision plan showing a reconfiguration of the proposed entire subdivision and also the addition of 0.52 acres of green space, which eliminates the possibility for the tower to fall on any of the proposed commercial structures. However, concern remains regarding the potential for the tower to fall on anyone traveling along Moore Park Drive. And actually, this revised plan is the last page of this packet here, which shows you where the proposed green space is. I also mail you a larger copy of it, where you can see that it pretty much meets all the the setback requirements for the tower. However, it could fall over Moore Park Drive.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Marone, Jones Fussell Law Firm, P.O. Box 1810, Covington, Louisiana 70434. This property, which is 21 acres, is located along Highway 1088. And as Ms. Lambert noted, it's zoned NC4 highway commercial, so it's a commercial office type zone. Our intent is to develop a small commercial office park on the property. There's a cell tower on the property that's been in place since about 2001, and we've requested the matter be tabled for, I think it was 3 months, while we were working with the cell tower company to try to get information about the crumple zone for the tower. Parish ordinance requires that there be a setback from each property line for the full height of the tower. Our belief was, and our belief is, that the tower won't fall 250 feet. It'll have a crumple zone, and we were trying to get that information to be able to present to you. Despite our efforts for 3 months, we were not able to get the information we'd requested out of the tower company. They were not particularly helpful. As a result, we've decided that we would revise our plan and simply accommodate the 250-foot fall zone, even though we don't believe that that is likely, knowing that the parish ordinance requires that, and since we weren't able to present information to confirm anything to the contrary, that's what gave rise to our revised plan today. In this revised plan, there's a couple of things that require us to still be before you. As I said, the parish ordinance requires that no property line be located within the distance of the height of the tower, the 250-foot radius, if you will. So we have provided for that 250-foot radius, and on this revised plan, no structure can be built within that radius. There are 2 points that still give rise to the need for a variance. The first is that we do have a property line that is within the 250 feet. And if you look at the plan, you will see that the tower is on parcel 9. The southern line of parcel 9 is within the 250 feet. But what we have done is we have created a green space parcel on the south side of parcel 9 that encompasses the remainder of the 250-foot radius. So we've got parcel 9, which is a non-build zone. That's where the tower is. We've got the green space, parcel G1, which is just that, to be left natural in its existing condition, so that if there was a fall, it would be falling into green space. It would not be able to fall on a usable portion of the property. So we're asking for the variance for the south line of parcel 9. Also, because Moore Park Drive is within the 250-foot zone. Now, I would respectfully suggest that there are a couple of factors that make this reasonable under the circumstances. The first is that it is common and consistent that there are many other structures that are allowed closer to roadways that are less vulnerable than this tower is. We've all had storms come through. We've all lived through a myriad of hurricanes, and some of the first things we see that come down are electric poles. Electric poles are often well within the fall of the roadway. The poles needed for traffic signals. All of these are existing poles that are closer to the roadway than what we are going to have here. Also, Moore Park Drive is not a major thoroughfare, obviously. We're talking about a very small development, very limited traffic, very, very sparsely used, as opposed to a highway, a major collector roadway, or something along those lines. So with those modifications, we believe respectfully that this is a modification to a plan that accommodates the 250-foot radius, puts no structure can be built within that radius, no improvements can be within that radius, but we are asking for the ability to have Moore Park Drive cross through that area as shown on the revised plan. I also understand from staff's comments that if it were the decision of this board to approve the request, that we would want to be certain, you would want to be certain that parcel G1, that green space parcel, is in fact preserved as green space, that it doesn't, there's nothing lost in the translation between what I'm telling you here today and what may happen going forward. So in that regard, what we would propose that if the board were to approve that request, that on all of our subdivision plans, our tentative and our preliminary, and most importantly, our final subdivision plat, that we not only identify that parcel as a green space parcel, but we identify that it is a no-build parcel, and that we identify on the face of the plat why it is a no-build parcel, which is that it is intended to encompass part of the radius buffer for the tower. All of those things we believe will ensure that it stays as a green space no-build parcel. It will run with the land. It'll be recorded in the courthouse with the final plat. Any buyer of the parcel would take subject to that. To ever amend that plat, it would require coming back to the parish and to the planning commission for a public hearing so that that could happen. So that would assure that that concern would be addressed moving forward. So with those explanations, we respectfully request your approval of the limited variance, again, to allow for the location of the southern line of parcel 9 and to allow Moore Park to be within the radius. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the board members may have at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Moreau.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here in opposition to this case? Seeing none, I will recognize Mr. Blash. Question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, and I don't know if Mr. Roan can answer. Hopefully, Helen, maybe you can help address this. Is there a known instance of a tower being placed within the parish at this time that could cross a roadway? Have we allowed this before?
The board has granted variances in the same, similar variances, I would say.
Okay, so this is something that does exist within certain circumstances. I understand. Okay. My feelings on it. I feel as though a lot of the safety issues have been taken off of the table. I don't think there's anything that really concerns me or bothers me beyond this. I think a lot of times if you're going to be in bad weather, you're not going to be a lot of people on the road driving. I kind of like the chances or the odds that we're going to protect the safety of the people of St. Tammany. So I have no issue with it myself.
Very good. Recognize Mr. Spees.
I got a question for Mr. Morone. Couldn't you have had an engineer that's involved in building these towers to tell you that there is a way that it could show and demonstrate how the tower would fall? Couldn't you do that?
We tried to get that information out of the tower provider or the operator of the tower, and we were not able to get that. When we weren't able to get that, we did consider what you had suggested, just going to a third-party engineer. The timing to get that done, it was the few that we talked to was going to take an enormous amount of time for them to get comfortable because they didn't have the plans, they didn't have all the details. We were going to have to go back to the tower company to get that from them for them to analyze. That we felt like we had already waited 3 months. We felt like making the modification that you see before you was our best alternative.
Well, it seems like that all those around Moore Park, industrial, right? So there'd be a lot of people working in there, is that correct?
It would be commercial or office space.
Okay. So there would be some traffic on Moore Park Road.
Right, so there are, I think there are 8 usable parcels in there, I believe. 9 usable parcels in there.
Okay.
So it's a half moon, if you will.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Spees, I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Louisiana, the state of Texas. I don't think I'd touch that. Let me recognize Mr. Dale.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, just to comment, I think the tower's been there for more than 20 years, so, yeah. So a question about the access, is that pretty much, is in the intent that the parcels would have direct access to Moore Park Drive and not to 1088? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I mean, I would just add that hopefully that green space, no driveways would be allowed, and then it would more or less hopefully guarantee that for emergency services that there would be driveway access in the case of the tower actually falling down across the roadway.
Understood.
So,
Yes, sir.
Okay. So maybe a comment, something to add. I don't know if in here we had the stipulations you were saying about the green space in terms of no build, no improvement. I'd just add no driveway, if we can put that into a motion. That makes sense.
Make your motion subject to the stipulations that Mr. Moreau expressed at the podium.
That would be-
motion.
I don't see any other questions or comments, so I would entertain a motion. Would you like to make a motion, Mr. Daly?
I would gladly make a motion to approve with the stipulations Mr. Morone stated, which would also include a driveway within the green space area.
No driveway, correct?
No driveway,
Okay.
sorry. Prohibiting a driveway access.
We have a motion to approve with those stipulations by Mr. Daly. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Ms. Thomas. Any other comment or discussion? Seeing none, please vote with your screen.
Motion carries.
The next case for this afternoon is BOA case 2023-3208, request by applicant in an A6 multiple family residential zoning district to reduce the required rear yard pool setback from 5 feet to 2 feet. The property is located at 449 Marina Front Drive in Mandeville, Louisiana. The applicant representative is FKC Investments, Mr. Franklin Kyle. Staff comments, please.
The objective of the request is to allow for the construction of a 240 square foot or 8 by 30 swimming pool in the rear yard, located 10 feet from the existing bulkhead and 15 feet from the outer edge of the dock. While the pool would meet the required rear yard setback from the bulkhead, it would not meet the required setback from the property line and be located only 2 feet from the rear property line. The requested variance is a personal preference rather than a property hardship.
Very good. Sir, please state your name and address and your affiliation with this case.
Franklin Kyle, 638 Village Lane North, Mandeville, 70471. I represent FKC Investments and also the owner of the property. As Helen, in the most simple way, Helen said, this is not hardship, this is desire. There is, these are very small unit pads out there. It is on the river. Being a landscape architect, I'm happy to do good design, and I can fit most anything I can in a certain amount of space, but it's very, very difficult on this lot. And I think it's a reasonable request only because this side of the lot that we're asking the 3-foot variance, it faces the river, so there will never be anyone behind it. It's a 3-foot variance on a 5-foot setback, and I hope you review that positively. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in opposition to this request for the variance on Marina Drive? Seeing none, I will recognize myself. I don't know how old that bulkhead is, but once you put that pool in there and fill it with water, the loading on that bulkhead and those pilings is going to change.
Correct.
I mean, you've already looked into that.
Oh, yeah, the pool, if we're granted the variance and the pool is constructed, the pools will be pile supported, like the house is, most of the house. And also, that's enough. Yeah, it's going to be pile supported, but also, the thing is, the bulkhead is not on the property line. The bulkhead is actually 12 foot past the property line. So yes, everything down the ground level is going to be pile supported.
Good.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to recognize Ms. Thomas.
I did note that the homeowners association gives you approval and says that this will be actually advantageous to this area. I drove by and took a look at it, and I would see how that would be of benefit to that area.
Thank you.
I would like to recognize Mr. Daly.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on what you said a little more, but understanding that there's part of the, outside the property, between the property and the bulkhead, is the bulkhead maintained by the homeowners association then?
I believe it has been maintained by the marina all these years, but now this portion of the marina is now separate, its own separate entity. So, as I understand it, we as a homeowner that is adjacent to Unit 1 will take care of that bulkhead.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, anything else from the board? Seeing none, anybody feel like going with a motion here?
I move to accept the variance by the applicant for case number 2023-3208 to reduce the required rear yard pool setback from 5 feet to 2 feet.
I have a motion by Ms. Thomas to approve the variance request. Do I hear a second? I got a second from Mr. Spies. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote with your screen.
Motion carries. All in favor?
Thank you.
Sir. Next case for this afternoon is BOA case 2023-3210. A request by an applicant in an A1 suburban zoning district for an after-the-fact request you don't want to talk. Request for a reduction of a portion of the required 50-foot no-cut buffer to 5 feet. The property is located at 289 Shenandoah Lane, Covington, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Angelina Burst. Staff comments, please.
The objective of the request is to allow for the 12-foot wide driveway to remain in its current location, approximately 20 feet from the property line, and to maintain a 5-foot no-cut buffer or right row of existing pine trees planted 6 feet apart. The buffer is proposed to be replanted with clumping bamboo 6 foot apart to create a vegetative screen. As stated in the attached narrative or drawing, the cleared area would also reseed itself from the existing remaining pine trees and native shrubs. The 50-foot no-cut buffer will not be cleared in the future, allowing for the trees and shrubs to grow. While an attempt is being made to plant some bamboo and allow for the 20-foot buffer to grow and be maintained in the future, the requested variance to reduce a portion of the required 50-foot buffer on the west side is a personal preference rather than property hardship. Considering the size of the property, which is 12 acres, the driveway could be relocated toward the east side to allow for the replanting of the required 50-foot no-cut buffer. Should the board be in favor of the request, it should be subject to the following: provide a timeline to complete the replanting of the bamboo and apply for an after-the-fact land clearing permit. Should the board not be in favor of the request, it should be subject to the following: move the driveway a minimum of 50 feet from the property line and submit a replanting plan which will allow to replant the 50-foot no-cut buffer with a variety of native trees and shrub and a timeline to complete the replanting.
I'd just like to pause a second. Ms. Contois has decided to join us. Could you please come up here, Reagan, where we can, your timing is absolutely fabulous. And we thank you for being here this afternoon. Please state your name and address and your affiliation with this case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Marone again, Jones Fusil, P.O. Box 1810, Covington, Louisiana 70434, here on behalf of the applicant, Miss Angelina Burst. This property, which is 12 acres, is in the northeast corner of the Plantation subdivision, this is actually the last parcel in the subdivision. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Plantation is a little bit unique, and I think it's important to understand sort of what it is and how it is laid out. It's a very low-density development, large parcels. Many of the residents have horses. One has cattle. There's only I think it's about 15 homes in the entire development. Historically, almost the entire development was cleared. It was all pasture land that was used as cattle, to run cattle, all through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up until the developer acquired it, and then he planted some plantation pines in portions of it that he intended to harvest as part of trying to monetize some of the property at that time. There is apparently a provision under the A1 zoning category that requires a 50-foot buffer along the entire perimeter. The request here is to grant a variance to modify that for the driveway that is existing that was recently put in within that buffer area. In this particular parcel, there are only 2 neighbors that would be affected. Both of those neighbors have no objection to the variance with the planting of the bamboo as we propose. Many of the driveways in the plantation are along the property line, so that's not uncharacteristic or unusual. There are a number that run right along the property line, because there are portions of the property of the plantation that are still pasture land. What is being proposed here is not uncommon. Also, this particular property line, if you look on the surveys that are attached, is about 875 feet long. The stretch where we're requesting the variance is 300 feet of that 875 feet. So it's a relatively short stretch where we encroach into that buffer that we're asking for the relief. If you will look at the aerials that are attached in your packet, in particular the first one, you see the site that is outlined in blue. I want to bring your attention to the the west side of the property line. And so the west side of that property line, there is a large treed buffer there. So the area between where this variance would be granted and where the next home would be to the west has a very large buffer that is there on the neighbor's property. And so that'll of course be enhanced by the bamboo that we're gonna propose to plant that I'll talk about in a moment. But it's important, I think, for you to know that even with the driveway in its current location, there is an enormous buffer that exists on the opposite parcel. These pines, and in particular this part of the plantation, really from the end of Shenandoah Drive to the parcel, sustained pretty heavy damage in Ida. The pines were damaged, were crisscrossed. In fact, for the homes that are already existing in this area, the residents there had to be, their roadway had to be cut to get them out of there. So a lot of these trees that were removed were damaged. Not all of them, but there was significant damage in this area to the trees within that buffer but for the driveway, many of those would have had to have been removed anyway because they were leaning or broken or damaged as a result of Ida. So we recognize that we need to propose some mitigation for the error that occurred that gives rise to our request for the variance this evening, and that is laid out in the staff comments. In talking to the neighbor with the burse, we are proposing that we leave the trees that are remaining. Then within that 20 feet between the property line and the driveway, that we will come back and we will plant that area with clumping bamboo that will provide, quite frankly, a better screening, if you will, than the plantation pines that were there to begin with once that bamboo is able to mature. So if there is a willingness to grant the variance that we're requesting, we would ask that it be subject to replanting this area with clumping bamboo. As far as the timing, we would request that it be done prior to a certificate of occupancy for the house that would be built there. The reason that we're asking for that is because we want to make sure for the survivability of the bamboo that this road is going to have to continue to be reworked a little bit, the driveway, and we want to make sure that that is done, that it is solid, that we don't have the bamboo that gets damaged as a part of making sure that that driveway is fully functional. So we would ask that you consider that as the timing or the trigger for when that bamboo needs to be in place. There will be an inspection by the staff and the parish at that point anyway, and it would be a good opportunity, we believe, to make sure that we will have complied with the request or our obligation to replant the bamboo. So with all that being said, we have a unique development. The impact in this particular location is, I would respectfully say, negligible, but certainly minimal. The neighbors are not objecting to it. There is a large existing buffer on the west side of the subject property line that goes well beyond the 100 feet. Driveways in the plantation along property lines are not inconsistent, and we would propose to plant the bamboo as set forth in your staff comments and as in the time frame that I mentioned. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have, but we would respectfully request your approval of the variance for the buffer as proposed with the bamboo plantings. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone here in opposition to this request? I am surprised because we did get a letter. Is that
That's correct.
a letter in opposition?
But this is the letter that we received that I printed for you.
Everybody's got a copy of that.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, could I see the letter?
Yes, you may. And while we're doing that, I'll recognize myself. I have a question and a comment. The comment is there are still trees that if you drive the property out there in Shenandoah down in there are trees, a lot of trees that are still leaning.
Yeah.
After the hurricane. And my next question may need Reagan's, but I asked Paul a question. Bamboo is, I know nothing. Bamboo is intrusive. Is bamboo and the trees in bamboo, will bamboo shut out the trees, or can the trees survive with bamboo taking over?
I'll give you my answer, but I'll defer to Regan if she wants to answer that question. I believe the bamboo can survive in proximity.
I'm not worried about the bamboo. I want the trees to survive.
I'll defer to Ms.
I mean,
Contours
Mr.
on
Daly, do you want to talk to that, or?
I mean, isn't clumping bamboo it doesn't spread? Isn't that the key?
Well,
that's the intent.
Generally, it's a
Yes.
grass.
Yeah.
If you want my personal opinion, I'm not a big proponent of it because it tends to end up being a maintenance problem, and especially planting an extra road, it arches over, and eventually you either have to keep cutting it or it touches the road and it becomes a problem. It is not, it's not native, and therefore it's not on our plant list. So it's not one-to-one in terms of replanting it with what we would recommend replanting with as a native Class A or B tree. However, I know a lot of people like to use it because it grows extremely quickly. It is a grass. It's just a very tall grass. So maybe you can, that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I address the letter?
Certainly.
Because I have some information that's pertinent to that. So the reason I asked, I wanted to see who wrote it, which is Mr. Lagalante, who's one of the neighbors. And when I got involved in this case, I reached out to Mr. Lagalante. I met with him at his home, talked to him 3 or 4 times. He asked, his comment to me was if they would plant some bamboo along his property line, that he had no objection. He wouldn't be here. And that bamboo was planted, that was put in place and finished Sunday evening. He confirmed to me yesterday that it was planted in accordance with his request of us and that we had done what we had agreed to do with regards to his concerns. So when I made the representation that the two neighbors, this is one of them, did not have any objection, that was the basis for me making that statement. I just wanted to be clear for the board.
Good, very good. I recognize Mr. Blash.
Hey, maybe you can help me with understanding what, I guess, the events were leading up to the applicants finding out that they did not have permission to do this. Can you kind of walk us through this? Because, you know, in the letter that we read, it says that the Bursts were not aware of this, but yet there were contractors apparently that were involved that should have been aware of this, correct?
Right. So my understanding of the way this transpired was that the Burst had contracted with the contractor to put the driveway in. The Bursts weren't aware, and the contractor wasn't aware of that, of the 50-foot no-cut buffer along that property line. That it wasn't until one of the neighbors had brought it to their attention or brought it to the parish's attention that they were made aware that the 50-foot buffer was there. So it was an error on everybody's part. I think partly due to the fact that there are other driveways in the plantation that run right along the property line, because that contractor had worked on other houses and put in other driveways in the plantation, but was now aware that exists.
Was there a permit that was pulled before they put the driveway in?
I do not believe so. I do not believe so.
Okay, and that's a parish requirement, is it not?
If there's any fill added,
Okay.
it's a permit required.
Okay. All right, I'm just, the reason I asked this, Ms. Marone, is because we get this a lot of times.
Right.
And it seems as though, you know, a lot of folks are under the impression, oh, just bring it forward, tell them you're sorry you didn't know. And it's creating a problem for us. We see this just about every, I'm not saying every case, but you know, at least once a couple of quarters or so, we see a lot of this. And so the problem has been that it's almost like, let's just ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to recognize the fact that we have these rules in place for a reason. And I say that the contractor should have been in a position to know if he's doing business in the parish. You know, and so I have an issue with that. I do.
Certainly, I understand. All points well taken, and I would just say I'm very familiar with the plantation, and I didn't realize that requirement was out there.
Right.
To be honest with you, that's not that I'm aware of everything either, but I wasn't aware that there was a 50-foot no-cut buffer along the entire perimeter of every one of those parcels. That's
okay. I do have maybe a question for staff, for our horticulturists. Is there some suggested mitigation that you would like to see?
I mean, if you want to propose that the driveway stay in the same place, then they have 20 feet to work with. You know, personally, I'd prefer for them to find a mixture of native trees to go in there. They can do any kind of screening they would like, because I think it will serve the benefit of the homeowner better long-term than bamboo would. But that's just my opinion, so you can
Because you
select
made
what
mention
you'd
of the
like
fact
to do.
that you know, the bamboo, being a grass, doesn't fit our list of trees that are approved for replacement. Is that correct?
Correct, because it's
Okay.
not native and it's not a tree.
Okay.
So, and personally, just being a landscape architect in South Louisiana, sooner or later, it's going to be a maintenance issue. And I would rather see them replant with a variety of natives, and then they won't have to have that issue in the future. So that's just a suggestion.
Okay.
To that end, we have no objection to that. If it is the decision of the board, then we would propose, rather than bamboo, to replant it with natives. We'll put together a planting plan that we'll share with Ms. Contois to take a look at, make sure that it makes sense, right spacing, right plants before we do any planting.
Okay.
Chair would like to recognize Mr. Daly.
I have a question, more of a clarification, because this one really perplexed me. So the driveway to the other two parcels, they each have some property that goes down, meets Shenandoah, and then the driveway essentially goes up between the those two property lines, and then sort of hits that corner of the southwest corner of this property, the triangle portion, and then it was continued straight along that property line. Is that correct
Let me see.
characterization?
Yes, so these three parcels that are down there all have a tentacle, if you will, that comes out and reaches Shenandoah.
Okay.
But there is one shared driveway that accesses all of them. That driveway kind of comes down the middle of those, and then it comes to the corner of the subject property.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the weirdest part of this, is that it was subdivided and then it dead-ended into the corner, not in the mid, like, there's no way of putting a driveway along that line and not being the property line.
Right, what you're thinking is I believe, accurate as to how it lays out and how that servitude runs at that corner, where then you would
Right.
come in at that point.
Yeah, it's just, it was very unusual to see that kind of subdividing where it went to a point.
Right.
Because in that case, really, there's no way of avoiding, not being through that buffer to access the parcel. Because it wasn't like hitting a square, it was hitting a point in space. Yeah. Okay. That was my clarification. Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions, comments on this? How about anybody like to try a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Blash?
In case 2023-32010, I would like to offer a motion to accept the variance with stipulations that a planting or approved planting, I guess, scheme or plan would be in place, approved by our horticulturist, as well, and allow for the existing driveway to stand. But that planting, the plan for planting would have to include native trees and shrubs. And I guess it's in accordance with whatever the St. Tammany landscape regulations require, so.
But the driveway would remain 20 feet from the property line?
Right.
But where the planning plan would have to have, would be with trees, native trees, rather than bamboo. Is that correct?
Correct. Native trees and shrubs, as in accordance with whatever the landscaping regulations are for St. Tammany Parish. So I think there's a mix.
Got it.
Is that correct? Is it not a mix of ABs and
Well,
shrubs as well?
I'm not sure if you're requesting to use the standards that we would normally use for commercial, like 1A and 1B per each 30 feet? Or if you're just saying, come up with a plan using the types of materials that are examples in.
Yeah, I mean, indigenous to what we're
ordinance.
trying to work with out there in that area. I'm not saying
Yeah.
apply a commercial, but whatever that regulation is, I don't know off the top of my head.
Right,
but-
so in terms of the size of them and that kind of thing, I can just work with them to figure out what is just a reasonable planting plan using natives.
Correct,
Okay.
And there is a question, though, before I finish this motion. Did you mention that there was a planting already of bamboo in that area, or a portion of that? No? Okay.
Not in
Because
that
apparently
area.
he's, okay. it's
Not
different.
in that area. Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Blash to approve it with those stipulations. Do I have a second? I got a second from Mr. Spies. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote with your screen.
Motion carries unanimously.
Unanimous, okay, thank you. The next case for this afternoon is a BOA case 2023-3211, request by an applicant in an NC6 public, cultural, and recreational zoning district for a reduction of the required 30-foot buffer on portions of the eastern buffer and a portion of the southern buffer. The property is located at US Highway 190 Slidell. The applicant is Jubilee RV LLC, represented by Mr. Jeffrey Shane and Sean Burks. Mr. Shane is here.
The objective of the request is to allow for the reduction of the required 30-foot buffer on the east side along the existing pond to approximately 5 feet, on the east side where there's an existing roadway to approximately 15 feet, and note that there's an existing ditch located within a 50-foot green space, and on the south side to approximately 15 feet where there's an existing utility area. Staff is not opposed to the request, considering that the site is proposed to be developed with a recreational vehicle park on a property that was previously developed with a mobile home RV park destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. So the pond, roadway, and utilities area are currently existing on the site and are mainly the only infrastructure remaining on the site.
Please state your name and address and your affiliation with this case.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm, P.O. Box 1810 in Covington. I represent the owner and developer, which is Jubilee RV LLC. And good afternoon. This is an interesting case. I guess I always think my cases are interesting, but I really enjoy this one. I'll tell you the short story because it's pertinent to what we ask you to consider today. On Highway 90, the Fremont extension going east from I-10. Some of you may know it as the old road to the Gulf Coast, if you're old enough to remember that. For a long time, there was a mobile home park called North Shore Mobile Home Park on the south side of 90 that just got wiped out by Katrina. It was really a park that was ahead of its time in that it had concrete streets, detention ponds, had lighting, light standards, a variety of things that you would not expect to see in a mobile home park. The contour of the land is low there. It obviously took a lot of water at Katrina. It has been dormant since Katrina. My clients have imagination and have an opportunity, they think, to make it a first-class RV and camping area by basically using the same footprint, but obviously we're not going to have any mobile homes, nothing anchored. We obviously will have customers that have mobility so that, as we all know, once or twice a year, and sometimes we get lucky every 3 years, but we see a storm coming. And so with this business plan, we will have a development that will allow people to safely evacuate well in advance. And so under that premise of a redevelopment, a revitalization, I'm happy to say that Councilman Airy, the Parish Zoning Commission, and the Parish Council unanimously rezoned our property from single-family residential to the current zone, NC6, that will facilitate the proposed use. The prior park had 250 legal lots of record, small lots to put mobile homes on. We've wiped all that off the board, meaning that we also went to the Planning Commission and got the tract re-subdivided. And essentially now we have 3 large lots. There's technically a 4th lot for the utility area, but the 3 large lots are for phases 1, 2, and 3, because we're going to have just sites within these areas where someone coming in with their RV would be able to obviously park and have facilities, utilities, etc. So now that I've given you the nice story, why do I come to you today? Well, one of the things that we hope to do is use as much of the existing infrastructure that's in the park, because as I told you, it was built sort of way ahead of its time in terms of its layout, which is very convenient, the roads, their curvature, the location of the ponds, etc. So as noted in the request and in the staff report, there are 3 areas where, quite frankly, we just don't meet the buffer requirement. We've got a pond a little too close to a property line. We've got a utility site a little too close to a property line. We've got a road a little too close to a property line. But if you'll take a look, of course, at your staff report, which I assume includes Mr. Burke's letter of January 5 and a plan attached to it. I want you to take a look at the plan attached to it because you'll see, although somewhat light in color, he's given you the designation in red of the 3 areas where we need the adjustments. So in other words, it's not the entire perimeter. And I might add that the properties around us are undeveloped anyway. So it's hard to imagine that allowing the current physical, I guess, configuration of road, utility, and pond, it should not be a problem to anyone in the future once we go forward with this new use. I might add that if we are successful this evening, we will stay on track, and we hope, if not in February, in March, we'll get preliminary subdivision approval from the Planning Commission. And now we have to go back in and sort of retweak some of the infrastructure, which is aged, and quite frankly, which code has supplanted, things that we have to upgrade, things that we have to change. But at the end of the day, we have a real hope that this will be a real gem on Highway 90. It will literally attract people from all over the country that travel through these parts. As you know, people look for these nice RV parks outside New Orleans, able to take advantage of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Honey Island Swamp, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just another step along the way. So we respectfully request that you grant the buffers of variances as itemized. If any of you have any questions or comments, I'll be glad to address them at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Is there anyone here this afternoon objecting in opposition to this request? Seeing none, I would recognize myself, but I forgot what my question. I don't have a question. I have an observation. And I applaud the efforts of the people like the developers of this that are going in and trying to put something back in service. And I think that we all ought to support these efforts when people are going in there and positively trying to develop something in St. Tammany Parish. I think it's excellent, and wherever possible, if we could help support that effort, I think we should try to do it. Having said that, I'll shut up. Any other questions or comments or anything? And I'll entertain a motion.
I'll do it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I would recommend that we approve BOA case 2023-3211, request for a reduction of the required 30-foot buffer on portions of the eastern buffer and a portion of the southern buffer.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I have a motion from Ms. Thomas to approve the request for variance. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mr. Blash. Any other comment or discussion?
I'll just say that I've seen these developments before. In fact, I think in Tangible Parish there are 2 of them, and they're both wildly successful. So I think it's a positive for the parish. So.
Me too. Okay. Please vote with your screen.
Motion carries, approved unanimously.
Please, Ms. I recognize Ms. Contois.
I was just going to let you know we'll block that whole site, and I think they're really keeping the buffers on almost everywhere, and the places they've asked for it, they really can't provide it based on the topography. And we've talked about how to move forward with their grading and such for the build out. I think they're going to do a great job, so I'm happy to see it.
Very good. Ms. Shane.
We got so many cheerleaders here. I'd like to ask all of y'all to come with me the second Tuesday of March when I come for the Planning Commission and say the same thing you said tonight, because I always need some help. Thank you for your time, and thanks for this.
Thank you. Okay, the next case for this afternoon is BOA case number 2023-3213. Request by applicant in an 8C3 highway commercial zoning district for a waiver of the required 10-foot side yard buffers and a waiver of the required number of Class A and Class B trees. The property is located at 61025 US Highway 11 in Slidell, Louisiana. The applicant is Brown's Village Plaza LLC. The representative is Vincent Nguyen. Staff comments, please.
The objective of the request is to allow for the creation of 4 separate parcels to be developed with commercial uses. Staff has no objection to the request, considering that the site is developed with some existing buildings and a paved parking lot. While the objective of the request is to allow cross-access from one parcel to another and to allow to share existing parking spaces among the different businesses, required number of Class A, Class B, and shrubs should be provided as the development of the site takes place. Note that the site was developed more than 30 years ago, and there are no existing trees on the site. Should the board be in favor of the request, it should be subject to providing a landscape plan before applying for the building permit for the new commercial buildings, meeting the following requirements. Provide the required number of Class A and Class B trees and shrub within the existing Highway 11 planting area. Provide the required Class A and Class B trees within the north side planting area. The creation of a buffer along Browns Village Road, and provide the required number of Class A, Class B, and shrubs, and add landscape islands within the parking lot with required Class A.
Thank you. Please state your name and address and your affiliation with this case.
Sure. Vincent Nguyen, Nguyen and Gu. I actually represent Browns Village, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Just briefly, and in keeping with the chairman's theory of trying to help out when people are trying to develop something, this is one of these pieces of property. My client took possession of this, if you can believe it, through a lawsuit almost 16 years ago, understanding that we were hopeful to develop this piece, and I've been with him all along, trying to get somebody to come in and help develop this piece of property. Well, unfortunately, the thought was that maybe some rooftops would move in, we'd get some people there, we could put some stuff in there that actual customers would come and actually have a little more, things to do other than just large-scale groceries and things. That never worked. It just didn't work. And so we sat down last year and we said, look, we got to come up with a better game plan. We've got to do something maybe to make these parcels smaller. And so that's what we've done. We've actually put this in 6 different parcels. We actually sold out a piece of parcel 2 years ago, but we actually put this in different parcels. And we have some folks that are very interested in coming in, some gas stations and things like that. Obviously, we'll have to deal with those later. But we think we have now a better game plan to move this piece forward. And it is. It's something that's been around for 30 years. I hate to say it. It is kind of an eyesore. And it's for no fault of my clients, who has done everything in the world to try and market this property along with myself. We've met with staff, I can't tell you how many times, to try and come up with a game plan. And so this was our latest rendition. We're here, obviously, because we need a small variance. We need a variance in order to remove some of the setback requirements, as well as we're okay with the planning requirements. This is a large piece of concrete. It has been a large piece of concrete. Obviously, if there's any plan that's there, my clients are more than willing to do whatever is necessary. We're asking for that variance tonight. This afternoon, please give us this opportunity so hopefully we can move this project forward. We are scheduled to be in front of the council, I think planning and zoning, at some point here in the near future, so that we can get approval for these parcelings. So that's our next step, but we revised that this is the first thing we needed to do, at least to be able to say that we can do this. And so that's where we're here, and we're asking for the variance. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them to the best I can, and appreciate the time this afternoon.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that is in opposition to this request? Seeing none, I'll recognize myself. Everything I said on that previous case, I'll repeat for this one. If somebody's trying to develop that, we need to support them, just like you said. So I ditto everything I said before. My second point is my question is for Ms. Contois. There's a lot of concrete out there, and they're not placed. I know we can plan it, but that's what we have to do. Or that's what they're going to do. They're going to do they're going to plant some shrubs out there, is what I'm asking. Is that correct?
So if I'm hearing correctly, what was recommended in the staff report is to basically eliminate the internal buffers between the parcels and to plant this all out with one buffer around the larger, all 4 parcels or 5 parcels, whatever that is. So, and then also put in the landscape islands, which is something that we've been working with them to try to make happen over the last several years. So, I mean, I think that it would basically be treating it as one development as opposed to a bunch of out parcels. And I don't have any issues with that concept. Some of the southern buffer against Browns Village Road is going to have to be taken out of existing paving. And a lot of that paving really is rubble anyway, so it's not like you're jackhammering out, from scratch. But basically what I'm saying is I think we can do it with an exterior buffer as is recommended by the staff report. I do have one question whether or not they'd keep the same number of driveways, because when you start cutting smaller parcels and each one wants its own driveway, then you eat up that external green space. So I don't know if that is something that's been thought through or not.
It's my understanding they're going to keep the one driveway. The problem is that we had a fight, if you went back, it's been 8, 9 years now, maybe a little longer. Some of this property was taken by this Department of Transportation Development relative to a widening, and they eliminated one of the driveways so that there'll only be the entrances that are noted here. And so we talked to the folks over at DOTD, they're not going to allow us to have an additional driveway. And so we're still going through that, the recommendation of staff, and we're going to meet with them after this to make sure they're okay with what we're proposing. Even though it's there, we got to make sure that they're okay with the way it's going to be ingress and egress. So yes, that's the next step, but whatever's existing is existing.
So we could do something subject to staff comments. Good. I recognize Mr. Daly.
Yes, I have a staff clarification, actually. So I'll agree with everything our chair said. In terms of the staff recommendations, it says add landscape islands. Is there a quantity? I guess you're working with them, so maybe we don't want to force a quantity.
It
but
would be as per the requirements,
As
every
per-
12 spaces required landscape.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, and we have a schematic sketch previously. It wasn't all of these parcels, but we have a sketch that kind of shows how some of the parking may flow, and they're aware of the island per every 12 spaces at the end of every row, drive aisle.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know if, okay. I'd rather not stipulate a quantity that would
Sure.
over the code, so, okay, great, thank you.
Very good. Chair recognizes Mr. Spees.
Seems like a good idea. The only question I have for you, does the code specify that it's okay to do that, to remove those buffers from the other 5 parcels?
Well, that's what the variance is, basically, is to take those buffers
that's
out
the
from the
variance.
internal. That's basically the ask. That and the setback between the buildings, which will now be divided by property lines.
Wow.
Is that correct?
Okay.
That is
That's a
correct.
big variance, yeah.
It is, but it's a very, again, without this, it's a very difficult, because of the way it's already set up and because it's such a large piece, it's the only way to do this. And so we've looked at it 10 different ways, and this was the least restrictive we could do. And this is what we worked on for, gosh, it's been almost a year now. We've worked with staff, I can't tell you how many times to do this.
And I might add that they're still going to have to come up with a drainage plan that meets engineering standards. So even though we may not have as many trees, they're still going to have to quantify the water and get it where it needs to go.
And we're aware of that.
The gentleman back here that was raising your hand, would you like to come forward, state your name and address, and what's your affiliation with this project?
Jimmy Davis, Councilman, District 7.
Oh,
Sorry, I don't
I'm-
mean, this is probably out of the norm, but I was just wondering, so I guess the design hardship is the financial hardship, is that correct? So there is no financial hardship on this?
I mean, the way we look at it is, for an existing site that's 30 years old that needs to be brought back into commerce, we work with applicants as much as possible based on when they built that 30 years ago, they had a different set of codes. So now they don't meet current code, so they're here for a variance.
So it's just basically to meet up to what the codes are today with respect to what it was back then?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Chair recognizes Mr. Blash.
I was going to help recognize Councilman Davis. I don't know if you saw him. And then the other thing I would comment on and add to what you were saying, I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to take a proactive stance to encourage development, especially in areas like this that have somewhat become blighted over the years. I don't see a reason not to back and provide, no, I'll just say it this way. I don't see a reason for us to deny this and deny progress for that area. So.
Well, you're on a roll. Why don't you go ahead and make a motion?
Okay. All right. Mr. Chair, in case of BOA case number 2023-3213, motion is to approve the variance as requested with staff recommendations to be applied.
Very good. You got a motion by Mr. Blash. Do I have I got a second from Mr. Spies. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote with your screen.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Board.
And I'll just make one more comment too, based on kind of what the board and there's kind of thought process today. We want to, incentivize rather than penalize, especially these older developments in parcels that just don't necessarily meet code, but, they need a little help to move it maybe to the next stage. So that's y'all purview, and just, again, rather than penalize, maybe try and incentivize.
And I do want to thank staff. They've been great to work with, and we really have tried to work through this to work it out. And thank you all so much for your vote today. We
And
appreciate
the
it.
planning commission is
Yeah, so I need you guys to do the same
February
thing.
February 14th,
Can I get everybody to sign a letter saying, hey, we're doing it?
next Tuesday.
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question before you leave? I see this, the outline of the building in red on here is larger than the existing building. Is that, is that an expansion? Or is that this,
No, so
what is
one of
that?
the buildings is no expansion. So it's going to be, one of the portions is going to be the middle section is going to be demolished.
Okay, so I'm talking about this one. So
Correct,
what's
that's
the
going to
difference?
remain the same. The middle section that you see up until there, right there, is going to be
Right,
demolished.
okay, so this red line doesn't really mean anything?
No, no,
It's
no.
just, okay. I was just trying to see if
No, no,
if
that's
the
just-
building was going into that setback so that I understood the plans when they came forward.
It does not.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
I'm gonna stop saying things.
Okay. We're doing on time. Beautiful. The next case is BOA case 2023-3214. Request by applicant in an HC2 highway commercial zoning district for the removal of a 24-inch live oak tree. The property is located at 67809 Louisiana Highway 41 in Pearl River, Louisiana. The applicant and representative is Executive Holdings LLC, Mr. Corey Smith. Staff comments, please.
The objective of the request is to allow for the construction of a 10,571 square foot retail store and parking lot. While the 2.849 acre site is irregular in shape and encumbered by several natural elements, the site could be redesigned to preserve the existing 24 inches live oak tree. After a site visit, it was determined that the 24 inches live oak tree is a grade A tree, healthy tree, and it would, if removed, it would require 100% replacement on site and/or payment to the tree bank. Allowing the removal of a grade A live oak tree would be contrary to the objective of the landscape ordinance, which is to encourage the preservation of live oak trees, not only within the buffers, but also wherever they may be situated on the property. Should the board be in favor of the request variance to remove the 24 inches live oak tree, it would be subject to replanting the required number of trees on site with cypress trees instead of live oak trees. And should the board not be in favor of the request, suggest that the variance be postponed to allow for a revised site and landscape plan to be submitted showing the preservation of the live oak tree and reconfiguration of the site.
Please come forward, sir. State your name and address and your affiliation with the
Yep.
project.
Good afternoon. My name's Corey Smith, 311 Telly Road, Picayune, Mississippi. And the request before you today is to remove a 24-inch live oak tree for the purpose of a retail store, just like the request stated. There's several. I realize this is an unpopular request to start off, and so I want to tell you that there's certain things with this property that make it difficult to develop. And just to list those out, we have a 50-foot stream buffer along one side of the property that's is not a straight line. It's kind of an irregular shape. And so it requires us to stay out of that stream buffer with any of our retention or detention ponds, as well as any improvements for the site. There's no public water to the site, so we're required to put down a water well to serve the building. With the water well, there's a number of radius setbacks which lead to the next point, which is there's no sewer to the site, so we have to put in a septic tank. There are restrictions on the radiuses and the distances between a well and a septic system. In addition, our site is not in a flood zone, and even though it's not in a flood zone, FEMA has proposed or has proposed maps that would include this in a flood zone in the future. St. Tammany Parish Engineering is requiring us to build our development and the retention as if the flood maps had been adopted. Those can change in the future. They're not set, they're proposed, but we still have to meet the proposed FEMA flood maps, even though our site is not in a flood zone. One of the difficulties because of that is that there's fill mitigation required whenever you're in a flood zone, which cannot be used as your detention pond. So we have a large area that has to be mitigated on the site, along with the retention pond, coupled with landscape buffers, septic system, well, there's just a number of factors that limit the placement of the building. This live oak, being the only live oak on this site, is in a spot and in a position that is directly in the area of developable area for the property. And so my request is that you would allow us to remove that live oak and replace it with not just the required number of 100%, but an increased number of caliper inches of trees on the site to mitigate the removal of this tree. And I would open it up to any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone here, excuse me, is there anyone here in opposition to this request? Seeing there's nobody left, I will recognize myself. Number one, what you just said, there's a beautiful live oak tree, 20 yards. You know, if you're looking at that, the one that you're talking about, you look just to your left a little bit, there's a beautiful tree, live oak tree right on the other side of that fence, right there. Observation.
On our site?
No, it's across the fence. It's on, you know, the driveway goes up there.
Sure.
It's sitting right over there. Beautiful live oak tree. And that leads to my second point, as an observation. As I was driving up and down 41 trying to find this tree, there is obviously a concerted effort along Highway 41 in that area, up and down, to preserve the live oaks. Just across the driveway from the tree is a good-sized live oak. You can turn around, look across the street, and there are live oaks in these people's yards. Every place you look, I mean, drive up and down, every place you look, people got live oak trees. You know, they love those trees. I mean, there's some people out there. I mean, it's obvious. This is not a casual observation. I mean, it's so obvious that there's somebody has made a particular effort to preserve these trees. I'll shut up. And I will recognize Mr. Spees.
Mr. Ballantyne, you stole a lot of my thunder. Mr. Smith, we very proud of our large live oak trees in St. Tammany Parish. especially in that area where you're talking about. And for me, I think you need to go back to the drawing board and see if you can come up with a different plan to save that live oak tree. You won't get my vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Spees. Would Ms. Contois like to comment on behalf of the tree?
I think I graded it an A. There's not that many of them that I would give an A, just because a lot of them grow up in the woods and, you know, they suffer all kinds of hardships. But basically, if you do decide that you want to let them remove the tree, it was my suggestion that you replant with cypress, because the rest of that site falls off pretty drastically, and, you know, and then he's got to put in a pond. So there wouldn't be a place to replant live oaks on that particular site.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Blash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just add, well, and just, I guess a question too. I'm sure you've tried all kinds of different combinations. And you mentioned something about a buffer between the stream or I guess a low-lying area.
That's right. There's a little, St. Tammany Parish in their planning and zoning, I guess, in the GIS maps, have identified this stream, or it's really a little branch that runs between us and the recreation facility that's next door. And so because it's identified as a stream, we're required to offset 50 feet with a stream buffer.
Okay. And what if you were to, and I'm just offering suggestions because
Sure.
This is kind of an uphill thing for you, I think.
Yeah.
What if you were to take the mirror and flip it the opposite way, away from the stream? Would that provide any kind of relief for you? And why are you considering that? In terms of the water well, and I know they have to be, like you said, a certain distance from the sewer, it just makes perfect sense. Would that also be, allow you any relief?
If we did not have the water well?
No. What I mean is if you were able to possibly put that closer, maybe to the stream, to the tree, preserving that tree and just putting everything back over, I guess, to the west side, more so.
If I'm understanding what you're saying move the building to the
Just
west
mirror it,
side of
flip
the
it,
site?
yeah, right.
And
Is it the topography that prevents that, or I'm trying to understand?
the topography does fall to the stream. It's going to create a situation where you've got probably 4 or 5 foot wall,
Chain wall, okay.
along the stream edge or the stream buffer there. I mean, it's something that the engineers have played with in multiple scenarios and trying to make all this fit. And really, there's an unseen factor in this, in the fill mitigation and the detention and retention requirements. It looks like there's a lot of open space on this site, but to meet the standards of building in a flood zone, even though our property is not in a flood zone, it really, restricts where we can place the building on the property.
Right. And I guess what I'm getting at, and I'm just speaking for myself, obviously, but I would be more apt to relax some of the standards that are required rather than sacrifice the tree. Does that make sense? And so I think what Mr. Spees says kind of, represents what I feel. Maybe we need to take a look at this again with some other options, potentially asking for variances in different areas that make more sense and try to preserve what people in the area are, apparently treasure,
Sure, and I appreciate that and respect your, what you're saying there. We took the 50-foot stream buffer as a hard, that's something that could not be adjusted. Is there an option to have a variance to that?
Well, that would be something you would,
right.
that would come up.
Those and
Develop
then
the plan.
the septic tank, the well, those are things that.
I don't know that we have oversight of that though, right? Wouldn't that be some of the health department?
But from what you're
Yeah.
saying, landscape buffers, some things like that you may work with us on or be open to work with us on if we could preserve the tree.
I can't speak for the other members here, but
That's a
I'd
staff's-
be open to that.
That's a staff's responsibility. Okay, I recognize Ms. Thomas.
Yeah, I would think that perhaps it would behoove you to postpone this and take a look and come back with perhaps an alternate to be able to save the live oak and relook at that with the help of the staff. I believe it might behoove you to do that as opposed to us voting and saying yay or nay, because I can tell you that it probably won't pass based on this tree. So I think it might behoove you to postpone.
Okay.
That's all, folks.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Chair recognizes Mr. Daly.
No. I have a question about that gravel road. That's all on the property?
So there's an existing residential driveway that is not on the property.
Oh,
Right now, it is on the property that I own. The plan is to actually split that out and just give that to the rear neighbor.
Oh, okay.
There's a single-family home that's in the rear.
Okay.
The intent was just to let him keep his driveway separate from the development,
Okay.
rather than have to enter through the parking lot of the store to get to his house.
Right. However cool that would be, but, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nobody's requested to speak, so here we are. The whole thing about a postponement is up to you. If you, it's your request. Otherwise, I can call for a motion, or how would you?
No, I think I can, obviously, I feel like I know where this is going. So definitely hearing some of the suggestions that were made and hearing, maybe there's an opportunity for us to explore other variances rather than the tree removal. I would request that we postpone my request for today so that we can go back to the drawing board, look at our site plan, and see if there is a way that we can save this tree that's obviously important to the community.
Yes, sir.
You may want to consider postponing for a couple of months because the month of February is very short, and if we have to re-advertise, so you may want to consider postponing till April.
Okay, do I have to give a specified time frame to postpone?
To April.
Okay, to April's fine.
Okay, Mr. Corey Smith has requested a postponement to the April meeting. I will entertain a motion for that. If is there any discussion, further discussion about postponing it? Mr. Dewey Spees has made a motion to postpone this case to the April meeting. Do I have a second?
A second.
And second by Ms. Thomas. Any other discussion? Please vote with your screen.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you all.
See you in April, Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That ends the cases for today. It is 3:20. How about any old business? I don't have anything I want to bring up. Go ahead.
I was just going to bring up that last time you previewed a discussion about voting.
For the vote issue?
No, the positive negative vote
Oh.
issue.
Yes, I think Emily addressed that, and but
We want everyone here to talk about it. I
yes,
guess.
that's right. That's right.
Can I make a suggestion on that? Because
Yes,
I have
sure.
been thinking about this as well. I think one of the reasons that we're having these issues is that we allow members to abstain from a vote instead of actually making a vote one way, yea or nay. I know just my own experience with previously being on another commission, we didn't have the luxury of abstaining, aside from the fact unless we had some attachment to the property, then we weren't even included in the discussion. We're asked to leave the room. But I think that's where we have the problem. We have an abstention, and then at that point in time, we can have an equal-sided vote, yeas and nays. And so I don't know if that's something you guys would want to entertain, getting rid of and making one of our rules that there is no abstention from voting.
Emily, would you like to comment about people abstaining?
The Louisiana legislature changed the law relative to appointed boards and commissions within the past few years to specifically allow appointed commissioners to abstain in the event of a conflict under the Code of Governmental Ethics.
Right.
So that provision would need to be considered, and there would need to be an opportunity for abstention in the case of a conflict. As far as abstentions for other personal reasons, I guess that could be included in a change to the bylaws. I'm not sure that really is an issue, though, that I've seen at a lot of these meetings. I'm not sure that would really
Well, that's what's put us in limbo before. We have an even sided and an abstention, two for, two against. Now we have nothing that's been decided. So if you had that third person making that deciding vote, then there would be no issue here. With the exception of when it was a personal issue involving them, then we might have to deal with it then. But how often does that happen, you know?
And wouldn't you recuse yourself at that point? I mean, if you
You'd
had
have to
something.
totally recuse yourself
You
if
would
you have.
completely, so you wouldn't have any kind of vote, so.
That's correct. Then you would have that potential for an even vote on either side. But to me, it seems like that's the way you clear this matter. Is it's like, welcome to the big leagues. You got to make a decision, you know. So.
There is considerable concern on the face of Mr. Daly.
Yeah, I didn't know this is where we're going. You mean this is in the context of the 4 vote?
Yes.
Right.
We drifted.
I'm sorry, is not what you know?
No.
No, but that's okay, that's okay.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. Okay, yeah.
I totally.
Now I'm less confused.
Okay, I'm confused now.
I think Mr. Daly wanted to speak to the concerns about always making positive motions.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
well, that's
where we were.
That's what started this, though, right? That's the whole reason for that.
No, they're two separate
they're
issues.
two separate.
One issue is that we have to have 4 affirmative votes. For
Yeah, not a
issue.
majority, but 4 affirmative. Yeah.
Yeah, not a majority.
Okay.
And that's
We have-
confusing.
That is
And,
confusing.
And both Ms. Thomas and I are uncomfortable with that arrangement, but, we've kind of let that sit for a while. Okay, and the second issue is that when we will get into these situations where we will approve a case, and then everybody votes against it. And it leaves the bewilderment in that audience out there. And, but we've recognized that, and I think Emily has addressed it very adequately. And what we do is we say, we'll pass it affirmatively in accordance with the staff comments. So if the staff has said they're they don't agree with this request for variance, if they don't agree with it and put those statements in there, we can do that affirmatively.
Yeah.
So there are ways around it so we can avoid those as much as possible.
And it may be
Well-
clearer if we just state, a yay is for, approval of the applicant's
Right.
request, and a nay is against,
Yes.
something like that. So it's very clear
Yes.
to the room.
I don't like
Mr. Spees?
it. I don't like it, so it's just.
Mr. Spees is uncomfortable with it too. But I think we've been able to avoid it. And Emily stepped in. The last time this came up, Emily immediately went to the mic, explained what was going down, took the issue away. The chair would like to recognize Mr. President. Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Would you like to speak? None. We're discussing, we're discussing old business. Very appropriate that you showed up.
Thank you all for your service. We appreciate what you do. I heard the conversation going on, and I just happened to say how everything's going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daly,
We're all good?
Yeah.
Sanders, how you doing? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Y'all finished matters and
No, we're still, we're wrapping that up. We got,
Quibbling and quabbling.
we're all good. We're good.
David?
Okay,
Yes, Chef.
I think we're good on the old business. How about new business? What we got?
We should have about 3 new cases.
3 new cases in March.
February.
And what is the
In
date
March.
in March?
It is March 7th.
7th.
Oh, late ones, yeah.
It's like February 7th, March 7th.
Yeah.
Might have 7 more.
Ms. Thomas or whoever, I may not be here.
All right.
I usually go away for my birthday.
Oh. So are you asking us to bring cake
That
later
would be
on?
appropriate. With only one candle though, please.
I will be here in March, so
All
I'll be happy to
right,
take over.
that covers new business.
I have one thing,
Yes.
just because the HR people were here. I know some of us have not completed, I have, 3 times I went back to finish all the paperwork. But I know she came specifically to ask the board, if you haven't completed the paperwork to get paid, to please do so.
Has you're good? Mr. Blash has not done his?
I'm a bad employee.
It's sitting right next to him.
I have 2 copies of
Mr.
it now.
Spees, have you?
They gave me 2 documents.
Oh, you
and
were-
I sent them in, but now I got other documents.
I was gonna say, there was at least 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So
crazy.
I don't know
Yeah.
what happened on that.
So if you could, please get that done.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Time
shall do.
allows, go to HR right now so you can complete everything and
She's,
won't have to.
Just get it off my
what's her
plate
name?
right now.
She's very helpful.
She is,
Is that who was here?
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
Adrian Stribble.
Okay.
Mrs. Dribble.
Okay.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
We have a motion from Mr. Spees to adjourn. We
Second.
don't need a second.
Yeah, just go.
We'll recognize that
Just
in
leave.
adjournment. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the 4.